Hello everyone. Here we are once again. This time with Cynthia Rushie, who is a police officer at the City of London Police. Thank you very much for having us here today. I would like to ask you about your work. You're a police officer here in London, but you also do work with restorative justice. Can you firstly tell us a bit about your background?
Sure. I've been in the police force for 14 years. Most of my background is in financial and economic crime in one form or another. And at the moment I'm in the training department, so training up fraud, counter-fraud industry and stuff like that.
Okay. The interesting thing is that you have been a police officer for a long time, but you were mentioning before that you had a lot of parallel activities outside the force.
Yes, that's true. During my time in the force, I've basically done extra work outside with local community. I've worked with children within schools and doing similar sorts of processes to restorative justice, where you basically deal with the child with some issues. You may be talking to social workers, or you could be talking to their family members and try to resolve whatever issues they may have, so that basically their schooling improves over time.
Okay, that's very interesting. Was it something like circles in schools or things like that, or was it more like specific interventions? Well, I don't like to call it interventions because it sounds a bit administrative.
Yeah, sure.
But you were meeting youngsters perhaps, and you were meeting family members and other organizations who might at some point have responsibility for looking after an underage person, perhaps.
Yeah, there was two actual programs that I was participating in. The last program was actually set up by the Mayor of London, and it was specific to assist children within East London. So it was dealing with boys that were underperforming within their schools. So it was actually a structured program by a local government to do that. So
and I mean, I can see the relationship, or how that you would go into restorative justice. How was that for you? When did you tell yourself, hey, what I'm doing is sort of like restorative justice, or it is related? And when did you find the interest to go into it full blown?
It's definitely related. It's a similar sort of process. At the end result, you have an issue to begin with, and the end result is trying to find a common mind between both parties that are involved. The way I got into restorative justice within the City of London Police was basically a programme was piloted with us, and I decided to apply for that position, and recently just got trained up. So,
okay,
yeah.
So you're now a trained practitioner?
Facilitator, yeah.
Facilitator, yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you're going to go into case manager and things like that, and there's plenty of other things that you could do as well. Check the Restorative Forum if you want to know about more opportunities for training and personal development, professional development. Now, the really difficult question, how did you get involved in the application of restorative justice to economic crime? Because that, to me, seems very innovative. It is not something I have heard before, and that was what really made me think, you could be a really interesting person to interview.
Sure. It's a new concept. It hasn't been done before with victims of economic crime. It's a new project that the City of London are rolling out. And the reason why it's come about looking at victims of economic crime is because in general it is seen from the victim and from the suspect mainly, and general public, that it's a victimless crime. So by having your victim on one side saying that they want to meet the person, to say, look, it's not just my bank account that you've hit, it is actually me that you've damaged my life, and to explain how they've actually done that. Yeah.
Of course, I was just thinking before that in terms of economic crime, there is this perceived idea, and you just hit on it, that it's a victimless crime. And people think, well, I'm conning a big organization, or I'm just stealing money from a faceless account. But people go into depressions. People actually even commit suicide when they find that they have been the victim of fraud, and to some extent, even a lifetime savings. People who relied on that money, or were expecting to or saving to live after they retire from those savings, and they find that it's gone. So it is not a victimless crime.
Most definitely, and we hear it so often from the suspect point of view, which is quite interesting, that if they had met the person, then maybe they wouldn't have done it, because then that's that personal interaction side to it and putting a face to it. From the victims, I think it's more of a case of, firstly, with traditional crime, most victims would like to have a result, whether that's in prison or they get fined or etc. But I think with a lot of frauds in general, to actually come face to face with that person and say, look, this is how you've affected me quite deeply. And like you say, it's not just the money that's lost, it's the emotional side of it, it's their home life, there's a lot of guilt, there's loads of issues that person has built up inside of them that sometimes they would like to get that across. Yeah,
and that's very interesting. What sort of outcomes do you expect to see or to find after this sort of intervention, when you have a restorative justice conference between an economic criminal and the victim? What can be expected to happen?
I don't think there's an expectation per se. I think what we would like to achieve is a few things, really. One of the main thing would be for the offenders that are coming face to face with them to really think about what they're actually doing, and hopefully to stop that reoffending. So that's one major part for us. I think on the other side, like I say, for the victim as well, it gives them that face, that individual that's been calling them or emailing them, and they've never actually seen this person, put a lot of trust into them without actually having that personal.
So in this case, you're talking about boiler room tactics.
Yeah, there's well, with fraud it is so wide. But yes, a lot of boiler room victims fall into this part of it. There's another aspect that we'll be looking at, and that's cash for crash. So when you're looking at insurances and vehicles being used to facilitate that sort of crime, then again, the suspect doesn't generally see the victim. Mm-hmm. All they'll deal with is the insurance company, as opposed to the person that's driving behind the car that now cannot drive ever again because they're so scared. And like you say, there has been issues where in boiler rooms people have lost their lives through. Can
you explain to our colleagues what boiler room tactics are? Because I had to check it on the internet. I went on Wikipedia.
No problem. Just a very snapshot of boiler room scams. Basically, it would be a situation where you'll get an unsolicited phone call or an email, and it would be almost like an introduction for you to place your monies and investments into fake investments. Now, that could be anything from precious gems to wines to art, anything like that. And then the boiler room side of it is the actual pressure that the individual will place on the victim to make them hand over their money. And they'll do that by a number of different ways, but mainly social engineering to make this individual trust them and believe what they're putting their money into is actually a really good deal for them. So that's the basic breakdown of it.
I think a lot of people, myself included, are going to find this very interesting. So don't trust anyone if you get calls or get emails promising you incredible returns, right?
Most definitely. If it's too good to be true, just don't touch it. You wouldn't place your trust in your next door neighbour in that respect. If they said, if you give me £100, I'll give you 50,000 back. So you need to apply those principles to people that you don't know. So yeah.
Okay. Lastly, this project that you mentioned is coming to a conclusion at some point next year.
Yes.
And it's being done, if I'm not too mistaken, with the Home Office.
Yep.
Okay. So at some point, you'll see what outcomes you have, and I suppose there will be a report.
Yeah, there should be a report that's conducted, obviously, to assess and review how the restorative process has actually worked for economic crime. But also as a pilot to try and introduce this a lot more within forces, whether that be in economic crime or other areas of offending. So, yeah.
Well, I think that, I mean, I said it before, I'll say it again, it's really interesting. I think it's a very innovative use or application of restorative justice principles. And I really look forward to being able to read the results. And obviously, I anticipate that they will be fantastic. So thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you.
And thank you for the great work that you're doing. I think this is fantastic that you find new applications to restorative principles. And in doing so, you obviously help victims, in this case of economic crime.
Hopefully, that should be the case, yeah.
Thank you, Cynthia.
No, thank you very much, Miguel.